Welcome, everyone. I'm Kim Wolf-Price, the Attorney Professional Development and Diversity Officer here at Bond. I want to give you a little background on this series. The Torchbearer Spotlight Series came to be through the work of the Bond Women's Initiative, and in particular, the Committee of Attorneys that does the planning for that initiative. Recognizing the significance and the significant contributions of the women at Bond, the committee decided it was time to shine a light on the talented, interesting, and notable women attorneys that have Bond as part of their story. The spotlight focuses on women attorneys formerly or currently at Bond in all stages of their careers. The Torchbearer Spotlight showcases the many ways Bond women lead and inspire others in their law practice, private lives, communities, and civic service, as well as their educational experiences. What makes these specials is that they are a conversation between colleagues, and you are invited into that conversation. Bond women light the way, and we want to applaud and honor these efforts so you can get to know them and they can inspire others the way they inspire us. We're excited to spotlight Dori Bailey today, a member in our business department. Dori's practice has often made her one of the only women in the room, and she'll talk about not only her work, but her mentors and how she works to mentor others. Our interviewer today is Elizabeth Morgan. Liz is an associate in the business department. Liz has impressed me since she sat in a classroom where I was teaching, and it is a pleasure to watch her grow and achieve as an attorney. These conversations are interesting and informative and a great way to highlight the wonderful women attorneys at Bond. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation, and now I'll turn this over to Liz.
All right, thank you, Kim. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Liz Morgan. I'm an associate in the business department here at Bond in the Syracuse office. And it is my privilege today to interview my mentor, Dori. She is certainly one of my torchbearers. Dori really takes the time to explain everything from the nuts and bolts of a transaction to complex legal issues to all young business associates. While talking and preparing with Dori for today, there's a theme in her education and career that, as Kim mentioned, she has been one of the few women in the room. So it has been fascinating to get to know Dori better, and I hope that you all enjoy getting to know her as much as I did. So without further ado, we'll jump into questions. So my first set of questions really revolves around you trailblazing as a woman in business. So let's start from the beginning. Let's talk about where you're originally from, Dori, and describe growing up.
Sure. Thank you so much, Liz. I just want to say appreciate all the work that you put into this, and it's really an honor to be speaking to everyone here today. As a torchbearer for Bond. So I grew up on Long Island. I'm in a small town called Port Jefferson, and my very first torchbearer was my sixth grade teacher, Mrs. Justine Coverdale. Mrs. Coverdale was a wonderful, wonderful teacher, and she just had a way of teaching that everybody could understand what she was talking about and really learn from her. She was just wonderful. And one thing that she did for me in particular is that she recommended me for an after-school program, which was to put together a television news program for a local cable station. And when she told me about it, I was so excited. I thought this would be a wonderful, amazing experience. I couldn't wait to do it. But then she told me that it was going to be for 6 weeks, every day after school, and we would be staying after school beyond when the late bus was leaving. So, I was so disappointed, and I had to tell her that I wouldn't be able to participate. I wouldn't be able to get a ride home at that time. So literally in 2 seconds, she said back to me, "Oh, well, I'll just drive you home." And she did. She drove me home every day after school for 6 weeks, and I did not live anywhere near where she lived. And so she really went the extra mile, literally, for me to make this opportunity available to me, and to make sure that I could actually participate in this particular program. And Mrs. Coverdale actually passed away a few years ago, and I learned that she actually was from Maryland, and that she was the youngest of 12 children, and she was born into a sharecropper family. And so, really from very humble beginnings, she rose to becoming an amazing teacher, highly respected teacher in our school district. And, I really owe a huge debt of gratitude for what she did for me and being a torchbearer in my life.
That's really great that you had such a good role model, at such an early age in your life. So then I guess let's fast forward a bit. So similar to you, I went to college in the capital region of New York. Let's talk about your time at the University of Albany.
Sure, yes. I went to the University of Albany, and I really enjoyed my experience there. I have a lot of great friends that I met there. I'm still friends with, and it was really a wonderful time there. When it came to deciding what I wanted to major in, I'd always, sort of my first love was, my English classes in high school. And so I knew I definitely wanted to be an English major. But I also decided to try some of the business classes at the college. And I found that I really, really enjoyed those classes. And so I decided to be a double major, business and English. And then within the business major, you could concentrate in different areas. There was the option of concentrating in marketing or management or finance or management information science. And so I decided to concentrate in finance. I really enjoyed that aspect of business law, or business classes, and really enjoyed that. And that's what I did. But what I found was that in my business classes, in particular my finance classes, there was not a lot of other women who decided to concentrate in finance. So it was interesting. There was, which was really kind of odd to me, because there was about a 50-50 split between men and women who were business majors. But then when it came to the concentrations, most of the women went into the marketing concentration, and most of the men went into the finance concentration. And so I was definitely sort of one of the few women in the room from my finance classes. And I actually, found that sort of scenario kind of continued throughout the rest of my sort of education and even, into my career as well.
Well, I certainly can share that experience too. So if for any of you that know Dori at all, we know that how incredibly of a hard worker she is. And I know you've worked a lot. So let's talk about the types of part-time jobs that you had before college and in high school, and also while in college, and how that shaped your career.
Sure. Yes, I'd be happy to. So I feel like I've been working for a long time. So I think my very, very first job was, babysitting the neighborhood kids. I probably started that when I was about 12. Then when I turned 14, I started volunteering at the nursing home and, in our community, and I would read stories to the residents there. Then when I turned 16, I got a job working at a fast food restaurant, being the cashier there. So it was definitely a big change from working at the nursing home and also from babysitting. So that was definitely a very, very interesting experience. Then when I went to college, I definitely had a lot of other types of job opportunities available to me. So during college, I worked each semester at the Barnes & Noble bookstore. That was our college bookstore on campus. And that was really a great job. I worked as a cashier there as well. And, it was really great seeing like my friends come in and buy their books or buy, other items that they needed at the bookstore. So that was really kind of a fun job and a good job to have during college. During the summers, I had quite a variety of different job experiences. One summer, I worked, so previously, I mentioned I was at a fast food restaurant. And this particular summer, I worked at a sit-down restaurant, and it had a salad bar, and I was a designated salad bar person to fill up that salad bar during the time I was there. And I really have to say, I have a huge amount of respect for people who work in the food service industry, because it is a very, very demanding, sort of physically demanding type of job. So the way it was set up, at this restaurant was there were these huge bins, 50-pound bins of lettuce and tomatoes and cucumbers and all the different types of fixings for a salad that were stacked up to the ceiling. And so I had this ladder that I would move around to get these bins down to fill up the salad bar continuously. So it was really, again, a huge amount of respect for people who do this type of work, because working in the food service industry is, very demanding, and it was really fun, but, definitely very challenging, sort of physically demanding work. And then another summer, I worked at a home center where I lived in Long Island, and I worked in their window covering area. So I was basically selling window shades and blinds to mostly new homeowners who wanted to purchase that. And I found myself giving advice as to what color shades would work well with, how the walls were painted. They would bring in, color schemes to show me, and offering advice on style and what went with what. And, I really had no background in that whatsoever. So I did my best, and hopefully people were happy with what they got. But it was definitely very interesting for me to kind of learn about, these people, other people who were, kind of starting their lives, their sort of first new house. And so it was really enjoyable as well. And then my summer right before my senior year of college, I definitely had the best job for me. I was hired to work at First American Bank, and that bank actually no longer exists. It was thereafter acquired by another bank, but at the time I was there, it was called First American Bank, and I was hired into their credit department. And my job title was financial analyst, which I thought was just this amazing job title. And what I did and what they trained me to do was to analyze financial statements of companies that wanted to get a loan from the bank, and then write up a credit memorandum about the company, the history of the company, what they did, what the loan was for, and what their financial situation was, and whether or not they could afford this loan. So it was really a great job. I had it over the summer, and then I was also able to work at the bank, continuing through my senior year. And I really credit Patty Glynn, who was the manager of that department, who hired me, and as being one of my torchbearers as well, because that job was really an amazing job for me, because what I was able to do with that job is when I was in my senior year in college and interviewing for my future sort of full-time job, I was interviewing with a lot of banks, and at the end of each sort of interview, they would, it's kind of the typical, is there anything else you'd like to tell me about yourself type of question. And I would say, yes, actually, based on what I'm currently doing at First American Bank, I think I'm perfect, for this position, that I'm being interviewed for. And so, it really was extremely helpful to me to have had that job. So I really appreciate that Patty Glynn hired me for that job, and, kept me on the whole year. And it was, really a great experience for me.
Well, Dori, you certainly have the eclectic past in the food industry and babysitting and interior designing and then banking. I mean, it really is impressive. And I was a waitress for about 8 years, so I have some serious respect for this food industry too. So all these experiences kind of accumulated to your first job out of college. Let's talk about that and your time at the Bank of New York.
Yes, thank you. Yes, so I right out of college, I started working for the Bank of New York. I was hired into their management training program, which was in New York City. So I worked a year in New York City, which was a really fun place to work for that time. And what they basically trained us in is a lot of what I had already really learned at First American Bank. So a lot of reviewing financial statements and looking at companies and determining whether or not they were a good risk for the bank to make them a loan. But, what was nice about the Bank of New York, it was classroom training as well as on-the-job training. So it was really, really a great experience, really a great learning experience. So I really, really enjoyed that. And then once I graduated from their management training program, I then became a commercial loan officer, and I worked in White Plains, in Westchester County. I also worked in Poughkeepsie and in Dutchess County. And I was a commercial loan officer for, all the businesses in the area. So it really, my customers ranged from physician practices, daycare centers, educational institutions, construction companies, excavating companies, equipment manufacturers. It was just a really wide-ranging type of businesses that we lent to. And what I found really, really great about it was that all these business owners that I spoke with would just love to tell me about their business. They were so proud of what they were doing, and they would tell me, why they bought their business and how they grew their business and how they made what they made, how the manufacturing process worked. And so it was really, really interesting to me, and it really gave me a great insight into how businesses worked, how they're started, how they're formed, what goes into making a successful business. So I really found that, aspect of it really, really interesting. And also talking to the different business owners and seeing sort of, different management styles, different ownership styles, how they handle things. So again, really, really interesting, experience for me there.
Did you find that, some of your clients, were they predominantly male or female, or were they, can you explain about that?
Yeah, so, kind of continuing on from my sort of educational experience, I would say that predominantly my customers were the owners of the businesses were predominantly male. I did have a few women owners that I knew of the businesses that I worked with. One, I had a daycare center that there was a female owner. There was also a female executive director of the local Girl Scout chapter that we lent to. And then there was another female owner of a business, and the business that she owned was a meat market. And that one really kind of has stuck in my mind, because that owner of that business came to me for a loan at one point. And So she gave me her financial statements, and she wanted to get a loan to purchase a freezer because her freezer was not working very well and it was very close to failing. And really, she needed that freezer to really continue her business because of it needing it for the meat. So, I went through her financial statements, and, unfortunately, she did not have the business income to be able to support that loan. And so, I really had no choice but to really turn her down, which I felt terrible about. And so she came to me and she said, is there anything that you can do for me? And, I went home that night, kind of racked my brain trying to think what possibly, could I do? I went to bed, woke up the next morning, and an idea kind of popped up in my head that, I remembered that she had told me, she was fairly young, she was in her 20s, and she still lived at home with her parents. And I remember she had told me that both of her parents worked at IBM and had really good salaries. And so I thought, well, let's see what happens. So I called her up and I said, what do you think of maybe your parents co-signing the loan with you? Would they be willing, and would you be okay with that? And she talked to them, came back and said, absolutely. And so we made her the loan, and she was thrilled, and I was, so relieved that I was able to make her the loan. And it really taught me, I think, really kind of an important lesson that sometimes going the ordinary way of doing things, sometimes when it doesn't work out, try to think of some other way that you might do something, some other path that you might take to be able to, help your customer, help your client. Because I think in the end, it really pays off if you're able to help them and achieving the goal that they're trying to achieve.
Right. Well, you're certainly dedicated to your clients when you worked at the bank, and certainly now. So while you're at the bank, let's talk about what happened in the mid 2000s and all that jazz.
Yeah. So when I was still actually a junior loan officer at the Bank of New York acquired another bank, and it was actually not a very friendly acquisition. And the loan officers that were in my area all quit all on the same day, all at once, like it was kind of planned. And so what ended up happening is that I then became responsible for hundreds of loans that weren't previously my loans. And so that all happened. And then very quickly thereafter, the country went into a major recession. And so I spent a lot of time and working out those loans, trying to modify the terms so that the customers could pay. So it was really kind of a sink or swim kind of scenario. And, but I definitely learned a lot. It was, looking back on it, it was a good experience from everything that I learned. Definitely was an interesting time.
And so during your time there, did you have any torchbearers or mentors?
I actually did, yes. So I would say I had two torchbearers while I was at the Bank of New York. My first torchbearer was Margaret Schultz. She had interviewed me, and also after I was hired, she trained me after I finished the sort of more formal training program. Then when I became a loan officer, she was the person in charge of training me. She really taught me everything that I needed to know to be a loan officer. And she was just a wonderful, wonderful teacher, trainer. She was very kind, very patient. She was very thorough, very clear. Her door was always open. So I always appreciated everything she did for me to really help me along in my own career. One thing that I always kind of remembered about Margaret that stuck in my head as well is that when I interviewed with her, we kind of went through the sort of standard interview questions. And then at the kind of almost towards the end of the interview, she said, "So what do you eat for dinner usually at college?" And, for a moment I thought, wow, I've never been asked that question before. And gosh, what kind of answer is she looking for? And I tried to think, well, I eat a variety of things. So what should be the one thing that I talk about? And I thought, well, I guess I'm interviewing for a bank job. They probably want me to sound responsible. So I said, well, I sometimes have chicken with vegetables, and that seemed to satisfy her. And of course I did get the job. But after I started working there, I asked Margaret, why did she ask me that question? And she said that her daughter had just started college or was in her first year of college. And she was very worried that her daughter was eating well. What was she eating? And was she being responsible about eating well? And so, and she just wanted to know what another college student might be eating. And so I guess sometimes question's just a question, not really have anything to do with the actual job that I was, being interviewed for. But I always kind of stuck in my mind. Another torchbearer that I had when I worked at the Bank of New York was a woman named Carolyn Ilewile, and she was the executive director of the American Cancer Society, the local unit. And she was just amazing. She was like this dynamo of a person. And she, was American Cancer Society, of course, is a not-for-profit organization, but she made that organization so profitable. I mean, she knew how to fundraise. She knew how to plan events. She was just wonderful. And I volunteered to chair some of the annual walkathons while I was there. And I worked with her quite a bit, and she just knew how to manage an event, knew how to manage the organization, knew how to manage people. And I feel like I learned so much just from working with her. So I definitely, I credit her with being one of my torchbearers as well. And in addition to all of that, she also agreed to write my law school recommendation for me. So I also appreciated that as well.
So we discussed earlier how very often people say that your first job out of college is not a big deal. Clearly, that doesn't seem to be the case for you. It seemed to really shape your career. So then let's talk about the next step in your career. Let's talk about law school. What made you make the plunge?
Yeah. So, when I was in college, I definitely had thought about going to law school. I had friends that were going to law school, but I just, wasn't 100% sure. It was definitely going to be a big investment as far as, time and money. And I wasn't 100% sure. So, I didn't do it right at that time, but it's definitely still, kind of in the back of my mind, did I want to go to law school? And while I was working for the Bank of New York, I interacted quite a bit with our in-house counsel as well as our outside counsel on various transactions that I was doing. And, the more that I talked to other lawyers or talked to lawyers that I was dealing with, I found, what they were doing really, really interesting, and it just sort of piqued my interest, even more into going to law school. And one instance in particular that really, really I found very interesting was at one point we had gotten a payment from a client, from a customer. And when we looked at their financial statements that they also had provided, it looked like they were not doing very well. And so we were concerned that they might declare bankruptcy fairly soon. And so we were a little worried as to whether or not we could accept that payment. So I called our in-house counsel and told her the story. And she said, well, we can accept the payment, but we should not apply it to the loan. We should put it in a holding account. And so that it kind of sits there for a bit of time, because until we know whether or not they're going to declare bankruptcy in a certain period of time from when we received that payment, because if they did declare bankruptcy, there was a possibility that the bankruptcy judge might tell us that we had to give up that payment, to give that payment back, because perhaps it belongs more rightly to another creditor. And she said that is potentially considered a fraudulent conveyance, giving us a payment that really should go to someone else. And so I thought, that name just kind of got me, fraudulent conveyance. And I thought, wow, that is so interesting that making a payment to your lender somehow could be a fraudulent transaction. So I found that so interesting. And I just decided, I keep thinking this is going to be, this is an interesting thing to do, to go to law school, and I should just take the plunge and go ahead and go to law school. So that is what I did.
And then would you major in, or would you concentrate in law school?
So in law school, I had they did offer a concentration in business law and regulation. And so I think, based on my prior experiences with my business major in college and also working at the bank, it seemed like that was the right fit for me. And so I did concentrate in business law and regulation in law school, and a whole bunch of classes in that, and found it, again, very interesting. It was very similar in many ways to what I had already taken in college, but from a legal perspective. So definitely different in that regard. But one thing that I also found similar to my college experience is very few other students that were women were in those classes with me, in those business law classes. So again, kind of one of the few women in the room in that regard as well.
But you didn't just focus on business. Weren't you a research assignment for an evidence professor?
Yes. So, probably not consistent with my prior, focus on business. But yes, I ended up being a research assistant for the evidence professor, Professor Faust Rossi. And I worked for him over a summer, and it was, really interesting work. And Professor Rossi was just, really wonderful to have given me that opportunity. And he acknowledged my work, in the article that he published based off of that. And, so I really credit him with being one of my torchbearers for doing that, and for also encouraging me to continue writing. So he was definitely a big influence in my life.
Right. So your early passion was English, and that I know that you did continue to write. And in fact, you won a writing award.
Actually, yes, thank you. Yeah, I did continue to write, and I wrote a few law review articles and journal articles. And one of the articles that I wrote, which was about the previous financial crisis, it was published in a journal in the University of Pennsylvania, and it did win a writing award, which was great. It was really nice, and I was very appreciative of that. And I really credit Professor Rossi for encouraging me to continue writing, and so I really did appreciate his mentorship for me.
Yeah, that's great. Kudos on that award. Okay, so let's talk about the beginning of your legal career and your work in the business department here at Bond. So what did you do right after law school?
Sure. So right after law school, I got a job with a different firm, actually, Lakeland & Watkins in Washington, D.C. And I had a business corporate practice there. I did, really everything corporate. I represented domestic companies and international companies. I did mergers and acquisitions, stock sales, asset sales, commercial contracts, regulatory work. So really everything, and anything business related. What was definitely, sort of interesting working there was that kind of a very interesting perspective on sort of the geographic differences that we have. So for example, I had one client that I was doing a transaction for in London, and another client that I was doing a transaction for at the same time that was located in Hawaii. And so because of the time difference, I would have early morning calls with the client in London. And then I would have evening calls with the client in Hawaii, and so on the same days. And so it was literally every day we would have these calls. So it was really an experience for me. But I really learned a lot about these different companies and different places kind of around the world. And it was a very, very, very interesting experience. And I would say it was also a lot of fun. I'm living in Washington, D.C. My husband and I have two children, a boy and a girl. And so we spent a lot of time taking the kids to the National Air and Space Museum and the National Arboretum and the National Zoo. And, my kids could just stand there for hours watching the pandas. So it was just really, really fun. And we also, every so often when we'd have a big snowfall, we would go cross country skiing on the National Mall. So that's in between the Lincoln Memorial and the Capitol. So definitely kind of a unique experience, living there in Washington, D.C., which, was definitely a lot of fun while we were there.
And then, so how'd you come up to Syracuse? How'd you get here?
Yeah, so great question. So my husband, he got this opportunity to come to Syracuse with his job. It was a great opportunity, and we talked about it, and we thought, at that point in our lives, it made a lot of sense to really come back to our roots in New York State and to our beginnings in upstate New York. And so we came back here. And live in Syracuse area, and we're really glad we did. It's a great place to raise children and to have a career here, and definitely very, very happy we made that move.
And now you're a member in the Bond's business department here, so it's great. I don't know if you want to talk about that, or I can go into my next questions.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'll just briefly say yes. I work here at Bond in the business department. I do very similar to what I did at my earlier firm. I work on mergers and acquisitions, stock purchases, asset purchases, regulatory work. So very, very similar and similar experiences in what I find very interesting in particular is that especially in the mergers and acquisitions area, everybody has their own unique reason for wanting to sell their business or unique reason for wanting to purchase a particular business. And so it's very interesting to get that insight and, learn about that from our various clients. And I think also what's great about a business practice is that in addition to the legal advice that we provide to clients, there's also sort of like that business counseling that we provide as well, because each business really has its own unique set of circumstances. So I find that really interesting, to learn about the different clients and hopefully provide them, with the advice that, they can really use, in their business or, thereafter.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay. So my first, or not first, but a big Torchbearer highlight in my mind is you growing and really forming Bond's financial institutions regulatory practice from the ground up. Let's talk about that. How did that start? What type of matters do you handle, and how's it going?
Basically started because, as I worked at Bond, I was doing actually a lot of banking law work already, even when I first started here. And I noticed that we didn't have a separate financial institutions practice area. It was kind of within the kind of the larger department. And so, I thought to myself, maybe this would be, a really good time to have a separate department that just really focused on financial institutions. So I pitched my idea to Bob Kirchner, who was the head of our business department here, of creating a new practice group and financial institutions regulatory practice group. And he immediately said, that's a great idea. I fully support that. And so, I definitely also credit Bob with being really one of my torchbearers as well, and being, so fully supportive, of my idea. And yes, we really kind of started the group, from the ground up, kind of built it from the ground up. I chair the practice group, and we do, everything and anything for financial institutions, for banks, for credit unions, for thrift institutions, commercial contract work. We do privacy work, regulatory appeals, whistleblower protection, advice, mergers and acquisitions. If I haven't already said that, we do really everything that a financial institution needs. So really, I find it really fun practice to be part of. We've got 14 attorneys that work in the practice area. We've over 5 different offices. So really, really happy with how things have turned out and really enjoyed the practice area.
Right. And in my mind, it's only going to continue growing. So it's really impressive and really amazing that you pretty much started that. So this type of work is incredibly sophisticated. Do you find that there are other women in this line of legal work?
So I would say that, unfortunately, no. I don't find a lot of other women, in this type of work doing banking law work in particular, and, even more broadly in the business areas, kind of continuing what I've seen, in my sort of my education and earlier career. I can think of certainly the attorney that was the in-house counsel at the Bank of New York, was a woman. And one of my clients, one of my current clients, their general counsel is a woman. But, by and large, it's, again, sort of one of the few women in the room type of situation. So, definitely it doesn't seem to be very common for women to go into a legal banking career.
Well, going back to how I started, I mentioned that you were my mentor, and I know that a big part of your practice and your experience here at Bond are mentoring young associates, as well as providing teaching in the community. So let's talk about your experiences in your education and career and how that affects your role in mentoring associates.
Sure, of course. Yes. So, I think as a result of finding myself to be sort of one of the few women in the room, in sort of sometimes in my business practice or certainly my banking law practice, I really highly encourage younger female attorneys to give it a try, to try a business law practice and a banking law practice. I mean, I find it to be a very very highly interesting, dynamic area of the law. And so what I try to do in my mentoring of younger associates is to make opportunities available to them and work with them on, various projects and just kind of, give them a sense of what it might be like and what it is like, and hoping that more women will go into these areas, because I do think it's a very, very interesting area to practice in.
And so you're also an adjunct professor at Syracuse University College of Law. Let's talk about that. What are your experiences there?
Sure. Yes. So yes, I've been teaching for many, many years at the College of Law, teaching banking law, and I love teaching. As you know, it's a great thing to do, to teach young people. It's wonderful, but I do find, I guess I shouldn't be surprised anymore, but I do find that what was the case many, many years ago when I was in college is still the case today. In 2022, that there's very few women that take these classes. And so in my class, for example, I have 20 students enrolled, pre-registered for my banking law class in the fall. But of those 20 students, only 3 are female students. And so what I try to do when I'm teaching or, sometimes after class is really encourage the female students that do take my class to take other types of business law classes, and also to encourage their own friends to try a business law class or to try a banking law class, because I really believe that, if women took those classes in college or in law school, it would really give them, at least a small understanding, in some cases a larger understanding, depending on the class, of what it might be like to work in those areas. And so, so I do hopefully whatever I can to try to encourage that, to kind of open those doors for people kind of considering what they want to do for their careers.
Well, you definitely make an impact. So in addition to being a mentor, in addition to being a professor, you are also a Girl Scout troop leader for your daughter's troop. Let's talk about that.
Yes. So I have been a Girl Scout troop leader for my daughter's Girl Scout troop for the last 10 years. And it's really an incredibly gratifying experience. I mean, I watch these young girls become amazing young women, and it's just, a wonderful experience to watch that and see that happen. And we do a variety of, sort of typical Girl Scout activities, such as getting badges. And of course, I'm always the one to teach or to work on the financial literacy badge. They have to have that badge. We can't skip that one over. So I definitely go over that with them. And one thing that our troop is, sort of particularly proud of is for their silver award, we work to do a big fundraiser for the Ronald McDonald House. And basically what we did was we organized a field day event for the troops in our area, and everybody donated to participate in the field day. So then we donated that money to the Ronald McDonald House. We also partnered with area businesses to donate money to the Ronald McDonald House. And we also went and our girls cooked a brunch for the families at the Ronald McDonald House that are staying there because their child is, getting medical care here in the central New York area. So, it was a wonderful, wonderful experience for me as a leader, and certainly for our girls. So I'm thrilled that, I was been able to do this all these years and kind of continue to do it. So yeah, it's been wonderful.
Wow. Well, I've certainly gotten to know you a lot better in this process, and so is everyone viewing this. And I want to round out today by asking you a question. What advice would you give your 18-year-old self with all of your experiences in life and your career thus far?
Sure. Yes. So, I would say, kind of looking back, that, when you're young, when you're kind of, 18, 19, 20, 21, kind of those years, people will offer you advice, and sometimes you listen, sometimes you don't. But I would say that I was offered, wonderful advice from teachers in high school, college professors, even, when I started my career, people I worked with, who were my supervisors or even just my colleagues. And so I would say, I would say to my 18-year-old self, definitely listen to that advice, definitely take that in, because other people's experiences really do, you can really learn from them. You can really learn from other people's experiences and what their advice is. So I definitely say that to my 18-year-old self. And also, I would also say that, for anyone, it doesn't even have to be someone who's young, but anyone at all, definitely do what you're interested in doing. So, when I was kind of starting out and trying to figure out what I would major in college, I knew I wanted to major in English, but I wasn't really sure what else I was interested in. And, I tried business and I really liked it. And, I think some people might think that that's an unusual combination, English and business with a finance concentration. But I really felt that, sort of my analytical skills that I learned from, sort of analyzing a novel by Herman Melville was really very applicable to analyzing financial statements and my banking career. And then in my legal career, analyzing banking law statutes and regulations and case law. And so, it really worked out for me, certainly, to do what I did. And And so I would just say, to anyone, you really do what you want to do what you find interesting, because, I think everything, if you do that, things will fall into place for you.
Well, thank you, Dori. You're a great leader, a great mentor, and just an overall great person. Do you have any concluding thoughts for today you'd like to end on?
Sure. So I would say that, from my perspective, being a torchbearer is, really paying it forward. And I think that I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for all of my torchbearers and being so kind and so supportive to me, and making opportunities available to me, making sure I could participate in those opportunities and taking it to the next level. So I really feel that so many people did that for me, and I feel that that's what I try to do for others. Is try to make opportunities available and allow people to have experiences and provide advice when asked, and try to give whatever experiences I have to try to help other people. So I feel like if you do that, it's all good. And the extent that it helps people, it makes me happy that I can maybe have a little inkling of help to provide to other people in their careers or in their lives.
Well, thank you for being you. Well, I can certainly say from personal experience that you've made an impact on my career. So thank you. Well, that concludes our feature on Dori Bailey. Thank you all for joining. Bond is continuing the Torchbearers series throughout the year. So we hope to see you all there, and thank you all. Have a great day.